Hello everyone, welcome to another live hangout here at Voice Essentials. I hope you are having a great, what for many of you is the end of your weekend. We're heading into a new week. And welcome to some new names that I'm seeing in the chat. Good to have you come and join us for what is our last special guest show for the year. And this has become a bit of a thing that we do every year. Our last special guest is Professor Brian Gill. We're going to get to him in a moment. But before we do, I just wanted to say Happy World Kindness Day. This is something that, as she is in the habit of doing, that Linda has told me about in the lead up to today's show. And I believe, Linda, correct me in the chat if I'm not getting this right, but from memory from the email, it originated in Japan. Is that right, Linda? But regardless, it is today is World Kindness Day, certainly on Monday the 13th of November. You might not yet be in World Kindness Day, so let me get ahead of the game and wish you that for your coming day. We are really quickly approaching the end of the year. After today, we've only got 2 more shows to go for the year, and then we're taking a couple of months break. We don't come back until, I think it's the 5th of February. But we've got 2 more. We're going to do a full Q&A next week, and then we're going to do a wrap-up show the week after that, and then I'm going to go on a much needed holiday. I really need to go and get some dirt between my toes and do some camping and sit around a campfire and just look at the stars. That's what I need to do. But we've got a few more weeks to go before I can do that, and I don't want to spend any more time going on, because I really want to get to welcoming our special guest, a guy who I've said this before, he feels like he's a brother from another mother. I just love having him on the show, and I'm looking forward to spending the next 50 minutes or so having a chat with him, and I know you're going to get so much out of today's conversation, so I very much hope you'll stick around, because it's going to be a lot of fun.
Sound check. Check 1, check 2.
Brian.
Dan.
How are you, sir?
I am doing great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm doing all right. Like I said, I'm just a little bit. I need the end of the year to come. Is what I need.
I'm with you.
Yeah. What have you? We only get to do this, every 12 months or so. What have you been up to the last 12 months? How has 2023 treated you?
Ups and downs. But I'd say, that's something we accept in life, and so you've had some trials and then some many joys. So lots of teaching, lots of great students that I'm so grateful for. My family's doing really well.
Good.
So happy about that. How about yourself?
Yeah, it's been a full year. It's we're in that phase of life where my children are becoming fully independent, moving out of home, and so adjustments there. And but this community here at Voice Essentials has just been, continuing to go from strength to strength. It's such a positive space for so many people, including me, and so that's been a really good thing. How's your university teaching going?
Great. I have a wonderful group of students. Really thoughtful human beings. And you mentioned kindness. They all exercise that every day. I love being part of that group, and I'm honored that they trust me with their voices, and they share so much positivity in our studio class. And so, super thankful for that. And I have wonderful colleagues, and it's a wonderful place to be, and I'm grateful for all of it.
Yeah. Well, I in one sense, I'm not surprised to hear you give me that report, because, I know the sort of culture that you would nurture, and you I guess I reckon you're probably just getting, reaping what you've sowed. So yeah.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
No
Yeah, very
problems.
much.
You know, you have my utmost respect, and which is why I feel very safe to discuss today's topic with you.
Well,
Because
you have mine as well. So this is a safe space for this
it's a
topic.
safe
Yes.
space for both of us. We're going to get into what is, and for some people might go, well, student-centered learning. How can that be a prickly space? Well, it's because there's kind of different ways of approaching it, aren't there? It's student-centered learning, and for those of us and a lot of us who do watch the show, really watch the show as avocational singers, not singing teachers, and so we will orientate our discussion around that central theme. But equally, I know there are a lot of teachers that watch the show as well, both beginner teachers through to experienced, and so I'm sure there'll be some interesting things that come up, as we go along for them also. Let's lay some groundwork, some foundations. Do you want to take a punt at giving us a founding definition of what is student-centered learning?
I think student-centered learning is the ability to include the student in the process in which you're engaging. So to have a deep knowledge of the topic and the process that you're going through so that you can help the student over time learn about what it is that you're doing and why you're doing it and how that will help them meet their goals. I would say that is student-centered, student-focused.
So and I would agree with that definition. Not that you needed me to agree, but I would. What do you reckon are some of because it's kind of got a dark side, hasn't it? I feel. What do you feel are some of the misconceptions around student learning? How does what is ultimately quite a positive thing turn dark? What are some of those things that might lead us astray with this concept?
Yeah, I think that there's some misunderstanding as to what it means. I think what I've seen it spin into on the internet with comments and things about how we should approach is essentially that the student knows what they need and they need to guide the sessions. And again, I would say that's a flawed concept of what student-centered learning is about. And I see that a lot as the reason I mention it. So what I would say is we need to look at that and maybe take that apart a little bit. So first thing I would say is I gained a lot from a session I saw with one of my mentors, Thich Nhat Hanh. It's a Vietnamese monk, and I was meditating, doing a retreat with him, and he has a question and answer session with people who come. It's everybody's welcome. You don't have to be Buddhist, anything. And he was working with a teacher, and the teacher was working in the inner schools of Chicago. And she was at her wit's end. Like, I want to help these people so much. I want this to be a better place. And I just can't, I have no energy and I'm tired all the time. And went on. And she paused and he looked and he said, leave. And I went, wait, he's lost it, right? This masterful person who has deep truths, there's no way that can be the answer. And then he went on to explain that if you are not centered yourself, if you are not grounded yourself, then you will not be able to help anyone.
Yeah.
So then I take that to mean also that when you're engaging with students, you need to be grounded and centered yourself, which in a way is very much centered on you. So I think you can't take away the centering that is required of a teacher in order to create a space that is student-centered, so to speak. And it's really, I think maybe even saying student-centered, it's really creating an environment that is equal and establishing the rules of engagement, which is the person has come to you for information in a topic that they're not well versed, to try and meet the goals of that they're hoping to attain, some of which may be reasonable, some of which may not be. And so not only are you trying to create an environment where you are giving them tools to realize their potential, but you're also helping them, the word I use would be to become more discerning, more able to discern what is sustainable, effective, a lifelong endeavor, and what will not be possible for them.
I wonder whether like a different version of this we see in the medical field now, where I've spoken with some medical healthcare professionals, family doctors, who have gone through the process, I guess, over the last 15 years or so, as Google has become more prevalent. And so you can Dr. Google your own, own symptoms, and more often than not, that leads you down the pathway to, I'm dying from cancer. And so when we then take that to our doctor, the doctor then has to, it's almost like the doctor's just being asked to add their opinion to this, plethora of information, instead of us going to the doctor as the authority, not infallible, but certainly the end point where the doctor, we can really, we're going to the doctor as a final input of information to go, okay, well, we've done the tests, and this, you're not dying from cancer, this is what it is. And doctors have shared with me that over the years, when Dr. Google became a thing, that they've gone through this process of needing to not, firstly, being argumentative, finding themselves in arguments with their patients, to now trying to work with their patients, so not necessarily discouraging the idea that they would Google, because everyone's going to have done it anyway. So how do we be patient-centered so that the patient brings their sense of information and knowledge, but ultimately they are still relying on the doctor to be that authoritative person and speak really positively into the space? I don't know whether I explained that very well, but it's kind of the same thing I feel like with our singers, is that so many of my students, particularly when they first arrive, a lot of them have been listening to me via YouTube for a couple of years before they get to me now. So fortunately, in my case, I've one of the voices that they've been listening to is Dr. Dan. So
very helpful.
But they've also been listening to a lot of other voices, and so how do we manage that? Firstly, as students, and secondly, as teachers, that in one sense positive tension.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in an environment, I'm going to call it maybe deep learning centered environment, instead of either teacher focused or student focused. It's about deep learning, which requires an inclusion of both entities and a sharing of energy in the room. I would say, I love your analogy too. I would say that in that environment, a healthy, respectful skepticism should be welcome. I don't think that needs to be discouraged, but again, healthy and respectful. And I do think that with the destructive part of student centering, like any thought you have is okay and any way you want to perceive is okay, that's not really true. That's not really true. And I think we all need to be shaped by our environment, and learn how to behave and be respectful of one another. So that's student to teacher and also teacher to student. It goes both ways. And so, so I think also with a doctor, I look for doctors that will allow me within reason, because there's a limited amount of time we all have as teachers or doctors, that we can engage, but that will allow me to at least ask, just some quick questions. And I think that students need that as well. I think that I've been with doctors that just say, I get where you're going, but here are the top reasons why I feel you should proceed this way. And then I go, well backed up. My students do the same thing. I say, I get your skepticism. I understand why you would be concerned. I understand that there's some other voices that said A, B, and C.
Yeah.
And again, we don't even need to discuss whether they're right or not. That was their approach, but it didn't land with you.
Yeah.
It made you confused. So now you're here. So I said, here's the reason why we're proceeding the way we're proceeding, and give it several weeks to a few months and you will see the difference. And if you don't, we need to revisit those topics.
Yeah.
So
it's, I wonder whether, because I've been teaching long enough, it'll be 29 years next year. Yeah. I had nothing else to do. But when I first started teaching, the moniker of student-centered learning wasn't a thing. I mean, conceptually, I'm sure it was there, but it wasn't really a thing. And I think in part because it really, my upbringing within my vocal journey was very much master student. It was, you definitely, when I was growing up, you definitely didn't question, the master, in part because I didn't have access. And you couldn't easily gain access to the information that the master teacher would have spent years, engaging in. Of course, that the dark side to that was that it almost subjugated, had the potential to subjugate the student, and there was very much a power imbalance. And I think that the positive tilt, pendulum swing, if you will, of student-centered learning was to go, well, no, the student's not stupid. The student is experiencing something, and they, at the end of the day, they are the authority on their own body. And so we need to bring that experience into, into the picture. But it's almost like the pendulum swung too far to the point now where it's almost like we've diluted the position of the teacher to the point where, well, I'll take on what you're saying if I think it's, applicable. This is the student talking now, And I wonder whether we've got to bring that pendulum back to a point of balance.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the goal. And I think you're right in that assessment that it's swung too far. But it's important to acknowledge what you just acknowledged is this is born of a very serious issue that existed. Sort of a bit of an oppressor model where the teacher would insist on certain things aggressively and not really include the student in on the understanding. A lot of that also was born of the inability to really have a true understanding. Decades ago, we didn't know what we know now from voice science and and practical application. So it's a newer thing. And I think that we need to honor that too, that a lot of things are born out of situational, energies.
Yeah.
And so we need to identify them, name them as imbalanced, try to get them balanced. But if we don't talk about also, well, how far should this go?
Yeah.
Right. Like it was interesting. I was watching Sunday Morning today, and we had a major issue with schooling and with the difference between basically all the studies like born male, born female, and those numbers, right? That are that are in school, and it was something like 12% more of the assigned male at birth people going to school, going to college, compared to assigned female at birth, right? So it was that imbalance, and now it has flipped to where it's 15% the other way.
Wow.
And so we're looking, it is so far off. It's now worse in the other direction for who goes to college, and no one knows why, and people are afraid to talk about it because it's a very recent issue that women were underrepresented, right? So it's a very recent issue, and I heard that and I thought, wow. So I think there are other things that are happening, including in the teaching thing we're talking about, where the pendulum swings, and it's like, oh wow, we have to be more mindful about what we're doing and how we correct, and take steps that will ensure balance, equality, equal access, and support for everyone. I think that's what it is. And same with our students. Our students all need to feel like they can be fully present in a lesson with us, and not that we're an oppressor holding them down, which requires a really high amount of energy on our part as the educator in that topic, to inform ourselves on a very deep level of the topic in which we're engaging, which has so many different components. And if we do that and we're responsible, then it's easy to be patient with a student, because we have an approach that's, based on some solid ground that we can invite them to start to understand over time.
Yeah. I love how you brought that back to the student, because the question I wanted to ask was, because I know a lot of people watching the show today will be thinking to themselves, but what do I need to look out for, in myself? So what do you think the key signs that a student can see in themselves, where they perhaps are overestimating their own ability or underestimating perhaps the teachers?
You're right. Well, I think first of all, there is a bit of an issue. I think a lot of people head towards teaching because there are a lot of people who want to learn how to sing. I understand that, but I have seen many people who have gone towards teaching without taking the necessary steps to become a teacher with deep knowledge that can be discerning for their students. And I think that is a problem. You really need to have a fairly high level of expertise in order to teach something, which would mean that you not only do it, but you've dug into what it is that you are doing and how that might differ. Quite a bit from individual to individual. That is a tall order, right? Which requires a deep understanding of the topic and the theoretical underpinnings of the topic you're engaging with. Right. And so I think that if you look at it, we've got a tremendous number of people who might be, lovely singers themselves, but they really haven't invested enough in teaching. So then people are coming to them to learn, and there's going to be an imbalance there. There's going to be an inability to have a comfortable environment, because they're not going to be able to affect fast change. Which fast change being affected is what helps people feel comfortable in the situation. They immediately feel like, that's different, that's easier, I am now in a good environment, this is what I was looking for. Right. And so I feel like the fight and the evolution and the pendulum swinging too far, in a sense, is because we have a tremendous number of folks in the industry that are not well equipped. And I don't want to slam anybody. I just think, I know what it has taken for me to develop a skill set. And I know what it has taken you to develop a trustworthy skill set. And other people are in there, after an undergrad degree, before anything, and they just turn to teaching because it's a great way to make money, for a lot of people. And there's a demand, but they may not be able to meet the needs, which will make the student feel less than, struggling, unless the teacher says, hey, you're not making any advancements because I really don't know how to help you. Right. And most teachers aren't going to say that. And so then the student is going to feel less than. And so then the only other opportunity would be just give them carte blanche, so to speak. You just do whatever you want. I'm just going to fill you full of positivity. And you're not going to get any better, but you're going to feel good. accept that you're not getting better, which then is going to send an odd message, a conflicting message. And I think that that's the rise of where we are in the imbalance.
I think two other factors, play into this space alongside of what you're saying there is it's also very difficult. You can't know what you don't know. And so, I know the journey of education, higher education in particular, and I'm thinking more so into masters and doctorate levels, is the development of a really educated doubt over one's own knowledge. And that's actually something that you learn and you nurture over time. And a lot of people have not been afforded the opportunity to develop that. And I think it's something that most people can, if provided the opportunity to do so. I didn't go into academia having this in place, but I know academia has taught me and nurtured that within me, is that ability to question what I think. And just because I think it doesn't mean it's right. Yes. And in fact, actually, I just thought that I probably should really check that, because just because I thought it doesn't mean it's going to be accurate. And so I think one of the challenges facing students is encouraging, what I'd encourage students, the people who are listening, is to really develop that ability to have that really healthy ability to doubt one's own knowledge set, and in doing so expose it to other ideas. And that can only actually lead to positive outcomes, because you might find that what you were thinking was correct. Equally, you might find what you were thinking was incorrect or needs adjustment, and so you benefit from the new knowledge. But there's got to be a certain level of humility, vulnerability, to kind of expose oneself to the possibility that one is wrong.
Yes. I think that should be a driving force for every teacher lifelong.
Yeah.
And I know one of my main mentors and dear friends, Johan Sundberg, he exercises that in life all the time. And I think he's constantly looking for, well, is that really correct? Even though I've done 60 studies on it and shown it in so many different ways, maybe we should look at it a different way just to be sure. And I love that.
Yeah.
My practice with my students, every time I engage with them, I am thinking, are we really on the right track? Just a healthy amount of really, until I see that reaction in their eyes of like, this is it. This is, I can say what I want to say, the way I want to say it.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, this is great. This is giving them what they need, what they want. And my assessment of it is that's sustainable, that's highly effective. Yeah. So it's a win-win for everybody.
Sustainable and efficient. That is the premium outcome, isn't it? It's, So how then, I'm kind of leading us along here with some further questions about this topic. How then do we balance that sense of self-discovery, the work that students which we as teachers encourage, the work that a student is doing at home? I often say, your learning to sing doesn't happen here in the studio. Your learning to sing will happen at home. I'm just your touchstone that we come in here, we learn some new activities, and I send you off to do the learning. How do we balance that self-discovery against the teacher's input? How do you think we can best...
I think that with the teacher, you're gaining the approach. You're gaining exercises that will help coordinate and develop musculature. and proprioceptive awareness. I mean, that's really what we're doing, is we're developing a heightened sense of proprioception that someone can rely on then when they're on their own. So I think that's the aspect. You lay that groundwork, and then we also have to lay the groundwork that the student's going to go off. And I always say this in the studio, but then also at home, they need to create a sound playground. They have to be able to play around with different sounds with the guiding principles that they gain from their teacher. And so if that doesn't happen, then I think learning won't happen. We also have to let them know that if they go home and everything went like it did in the lesson, right, and they spend a week doing that, they come, or 2 weeks or whatever their timeline is, and then they come back to the lesson and you build more, that's great. But there's also a model where they go home and nothing feels the same. This is not going the way it went when I was with Dr. Dan. What is happening? What's wrong with me? And the answer is absolutely nothing. And I remember my brother is a phenomenal guitar player and guitar teacher, Kevin Gill. He teaches in Charlotte. And I remember one time I was talking about this scenario, you know, this idea, and he said, you know, he said, I'll have a student come back to me sometimes and say, this was the worst week of practice ever. And he says, good, because what that's done then is open the door of uncertainty and a possibility for deeper understanding of the topics that are being learned. So I think that's a key component in learning. So you say this in business models too, that in order to succeed, you have to fail a lot, is a lot of the suggestions. And it's the same thing in singing. You've got to create that sound playground and be like, ooh, that's not quite it. Ooh, that felt better. I wonder what that was. And, you know, and the back and forth is how learning evolves. And so including a student in on that learning process will enable them to be with you, gain some tools, and then go off on their own and play around and listen to their body and write down questions they have. You know, and I think that's it. It's a back and forth venture.
And I think also an example I offer to students infrequently is when I was growing up, I played a lot of squash. Have you ever played squash?
Yes.
Yes. It's not here in Australia, all of the squash courts turned into gyms, because they were able to make more money from the space being a gym and so we lost all of our squash courts. Anyway, there's still a few.
It's a great sport.
Great sport.
I play both squash and racquetball is the other one.
It's a great sport until you get hit in the back of the head with the balls.
I had welts.
Oh. Anyway,
huge.
It does not tickle.
It hurts like crazy.
Anywho, the growing up, I also had coaching in squash, and I remember my coach quite early on in my coaching process, he literally changed the grip on the way I was holding the squash racket. And he said, I want you, this is how I want you to practice for the next couple of weeks. I want this new grip. I want you to hold the racket this particular way. And I was a teenager at the time, so I was quite, you know, I did what I was told, but I was frustrated. Because it really did feel like for at least a week that I was missing balls like left, right, and center. But I persisted, because what would I know that, you know, my coach has told me to do this. So I persisted, and suddenly I started to go, oh, I got that shot, a shot that I know with the original grip I would not have got ever. And I can do that shot now. And hang on, now some fluency is starting to come. It opened up a whole range of options to me, and the stuff that I felt like I lost, it all returned, but it returned better. And I've often shared that story because often for a student, the instruction, it will feel like we're pulling the student back because, well, but I can't go as high if I don't push. Yeah, I know that. I know that. But if you learn to not push, I guarantee that in a number of weeks' time, perhaps it might even take longer, you're going to be able to go to higher because you're learning to manage your pressure but it's that frustration you've got to, it's delayed gratification, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And it's a focus on not just getting the note, but the way you're getting the note.
Yes.
The facility of it, the ease of it, the repeatability, the effectiveness of it, the way it resonates, and not just the actual pitch level. So we have to consider all those things and get the student excited about that, like that, and understand the difference between those two things. And so, I had an education today.
Yeah.
I played tennis as well. And my youngest son is taking lessons with the head coach of the women's tennis team here at IU.
Wow.
And I can tell you, I go to his lessons, and the teacher he's a Jedi master teacher. I mean, it's unbelievable. He's like Yoda, and he's just skill set is great. He knows motor learning, and he does all the things. And the advancement of my son has been really fast. So we went and played tennis today, and I played tennis, but I never studied. So I have all kinds of odd behaviors that I've made work, but I'm kind of like, ooh, my elbow kind of hurts after I do that or whatever. And then I'm watching him do these hits and then intentionally going fully through, and he's hitting cross-court winners. And I'm going, I didn't have a chance at getting that ball, and it's because he's paid attention to his teacher and gone on to, to do that. And I think that's it. It's finding a well-informed teacher that will guide you in ways that will help you progress quickly so that you gain confidence, right? And in that relationship, you should feel built up, which that is another thing that this man is a genius at. Like he corrects, but he says, and he includes him in the process. Do you understand what you did there? And he said, I twisted my wrist like that instead of the other way. And so he's getting him to name these things. That's what we need to do as teachers. And then they feel included in the process. And they start to understand what the process is and what they need to focus on. Which is that, I think that is, again, deep learning centered practice.
Where do you think the challenge of end gaming comes into all of this? Because the concept of end gaming, where we're basically, to summarize or to define end gaming, it's kind of product over process. What do you think a student can be doing to maintain it as being process over product?
Yeah, I think that's it. The explanation that if you've got a place you want to be, I want to play as well as, Serena Williams, or I want to play as well as Roger Federer or whatever, that's great. But if that's all you're thinking about, and then you're aware of the fact that, wait, I can't even do a forehand or a backhand yet, you're going to get frustrated. So I think what we need to think about, like in the concept, you said end gaining, right? Is it Alexander?
End gaming. Oh, sorry.
Okay,
end gaining. Sorry.
No, that's okay. The Alexander principle, end gaining, is the idea that you need to focus on the next step, not the eventual goal. And I think that not doing that or end gaining completely gets in the way of a process centered practice where it's let's see on this day, where's this individual? What's the next step they need to take today? And then you have to be ready that maybe they're ready to go to 5 steps later next lesson, or they might have regressed 3 steps. And you have to figure out each time you meet with the person, where are they today and what's the next step for them right now? And so I think it's so important that students understand that they're not just thinking, I want to sing on Broadway or at the Met or, win a Grammy with my latest recording. Because they won't get there. I think they won't get there as fast if that's their focus.
It is just, it's, I think there are, and I wouldn't want anyone to hear us as suggesting there isn't a place for us to be vision casting, for us to be setting you know, what at times quite highfalutin goals, that's good. But if you're always looking at the horizon, it's very easy to trip up, you know, over the little pebble at your feet. And it's so important to keep stepping out that pathway, as you're saying, you know, step by step, and allow the process to take you on the journey, to have you arrive at the outcomes that are inevitable if you do just take one step at a time.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And along with that, I think, a little, you always have to have a healthy awareness of what you want to do, your goals, like you're saying. But another thing I gained from another Yoda-like teacher, my mentor, Barbara Dosher, I remember her distinctly saying that in order to stay sane, one must always compare backwards. So where was I and where am I now? What was I not able to do and what can I do now? Instead of what can I do now and then what do I want to be able to do? Right? So you should always compare backwards in the learning process. I thought that was such a brilliant thing, and I share that with my students always.
Love it.
And I think it's the foundational element of learning. You're like, I could not do that 6 months ago.
Yeah.
I don't even think about it. It just happens, and you're like, that's great.
That's great. Yeah.
So it gives you energy, and it helps you confirm for yourself that you are on the right path, and you're with a good teacher, and that teamwork is working.
Yeah. Now, just so I'm almost going to put this final point in here for us to talk about, almost as a disclaimer for everyone, because I wouldn't want anyone to think that we are purporting that, you know, we as individual teachers are going to be perfect for every student, that we're going to be the right authority for every voice that steps into our studio. What do you think is a good process, or a good let's just stick with process, for a student to be able to recognize when is it not working with you and the teacher? Not because the teacher's bad, not because the student's bad, but because something's not gelling. How do we do that?
That is a great question, Dr. Dan. I mean, that really is. It's like, at what point? I would say, first of all, you need to engage in a student-teacher relationship with an awareness that, yes, you need to feel comfortable, and it is very helpful if you like the person and you get along.
Yeah.
But the main goal that you're trying to get is deeper knowledge in the topic you want, and a better skill set in singing. So you might find that there might be a personality that you find is fine, like you're not going to be best friends with them maybe, but that the way they interact with you really helps you do things you weren't able to do. So I think that there has to be, within the lesson, there has to be some kind of awareness discussed between student and teacher about what happened, what was better than it was before, and why.
Yeah.
And so I think that there needs to be a bit of a checklist, not just, well, yeah, I like my teacher a lot. We got lunch the other day. Oh, it's just so great. We have great conversations. And then there's nothing going on. I think they have to have in mind that they're trying to advance in something that they love doing.
Yeah.
And so then it's their responsibility, as well as the teachers, to kind of define that along the way.
Yeah.
What are the goals, whether it's increased range or ease of production, should be at the top of all of our lists. Better proprioception should be at the top of all of our lists. Does the person feel things better than they could before? And they're able to self-identify and go, wait a minute. My favorite moments in lessons are when I see the student correcting themselves.
Yeah.
Right? But in the beginning, back in the days of learning motor learning and all, I would sit there and just go, no comment, let's see what happens. nothing was happening. We weren't getting anywhere. And the only thing that was happening was the student was melting down, because in singing, they're the instrument and they feel on trial in a way.
Yeah.
So it doesn't work for certain motor skills. I mean, the psychological aspect has to be included. That's what I've learned. So you've got to keep motor learning in the peripheral vision, and use it, but to only a certain extent. And so I think that we need to check in and chime in and help a person understand a path, and then help them slowly but surely learn how to self-guide.
Yeah.
But I want to add to that, though. There's another thought process that people are entertaining, which is you need to be independent and not need a teacher, right? And so I see that, and I now more recently I find it more and more comical. I'm like, with all the changes that a body goes through in life, and all the ups and downs, and the fact that our instrument is invisible, it's quite complicated, and a lot of things that can happen that alter voice. And so you do need someone, an expert that you trust and that you feel comfortable with, that you can return to. And so more recently, as I am a tennis player and I love to watch tennis, who is at the match of all of the best, like top level tennis players in the world? Their tennis coach.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
That seems odd, right? I mean, come on now. They should have learned something and be able to be self-sufficient. They don't need that. Yes, they do. They're doing a physical activity that requires unbelievable attention, and singing is even more intense because it's invisible and you can't see how you're holding the racket or how you're swinging your arm or whether the tennis racket ends up in a certain place. You're talking about vocal folds that are invisible. So the idea that we need to create an environment where the person's completely self-sufficient is misleading, and I think ultimately harmful.
Yeah.
And that has been another thread within the student-centered thing. It's so student-centered, you just need to launch them and then they're good to go.
Yeah.
I've been teaching now over 30 years, and I love that idea. I mean, I would, if I could set my students free and they never need me, I'd be okay with that. I would. I think it's great. It's just not, that's not the way it works.
No, the best,
it's not the way it works.
As you point out, the best tennis players all have coaches. And interestingly, on that point, it's not uncommon where you hear of an elite tennis player being between having coach, like they've kind of, something's happened with one coach, and so they've kind of sacked, or the relationship's come to an end, and so they go through this period of time where they don't have a coach. It is so common that during that period, their game drops off. That they are not at their best without the coach.
Yes,
and they find a new relationship, and suddenly the game comes back on fire again. The only changing part of that equation is the coach.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. I do think, as we did in earlier, I think we should give a shout out to the reason why people push for that model.
Yeah.
I do think there is a model in which a teacher tries to make the student feel overly dependent on them.
Yeah.
So I think that's what it's born of, the kind of let's push that model out because you can't do anything without me. That's not a healthy model.
The aim is not codependency, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So we need to acknowledge the two things at the same time. Yes. You need to be able to check in with a trusted mentor regularly throughout your entire career.
Yeah.
But B, if it is a codependency or it feels wrong, then you should probably move on and find somebody else.
Yes.
And and those things happen because of personality types. Those things, who knows? It's so complicated, and we should all be wishing each other. The student should be wishing the teacher, and the teacher should be wishing the student the very best.
Yeah.
And a hope for just a happy, healthy life.
And on that important end, a happy, healthy life, we probably, I've just seen the time.
Man.
Oh man.
Man, Dad.
Oops, we did it again.
Every time.
Every time.
I love chatting with you, Dan.
Yeah.
We do have to get together. We do have to get together.
We do. I don't know how we're going to make it happen in person, but you know, all things being equal, we'll do this time next year again. Yes. And it's been so good to hang out with you. I'm so pleased that you've had a healthy and productive 2023, and I've been looking forward to hanging out with you for the last few weeks, because I thought, oh, cool.
Me too.
My time with Brian's coming up. It's always just a great way to end the year as our final special guest. So thank you for doing that for us.
Very quick, man. Thank you so much for having me on. I love our time together. But I was so excited about it that when I got the text from you earlier, I was thinking, did I mess up the thing? Anyway?
I saw that. I kind of read that into your response, and I thought to myself, my wording kind of led you in that, and I apologize. The way I worded it was almost like, "Where are you, dude? You should be on the show right now. I'm waiting for you. We've got an audience." No.
I was like, it's not till 9:30.
I know.
He's doing this at 6 o'clock. So.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I'll wear that one. I apologize. My syntax was not on point.
No worries.
But
no worries.
I blame that. I blame that on. This is the end of the year. I'm wound up too tight, and I need a holiday.
We need a break.
It's so good. Thanks, mate, for hanging out.
Thank you.
Cool. Well, there you go, folks. I mean, you know how. I mean, if you've been hanging out with us for any period of time and you've seen Brian before, you knew what to expect, and as usual, he didn't disappoint, did he? It was a really fun topic, and despite the fact that there was a lot of teacher talk today, I hope that you, if you're not a singing teacher, were really able to detect throughout and threaded throughout our conversation the things that you can take into and be productive and efficient in your learning with your teacher. And I also hope that through the process you heard the importance of having a singing teacher. If you really want to progress your voice into areas that you may not even be aware are available to you. And so I'm hoping that was the outcome of today's discussion. We've got two more shows for the year, one Q&A, so bring all of your questions next week. We will, I dare say we might answer a couple of questions in the final show, which will be in 2 weeks. Linda is joining us for the final show. She's got some really interesting stats to share with us from the year and how many shows I feel, Linda told me during our private lesson, I teach Linda privately, and she was sharing some of the stats, and I just felt tired listening to some of the stats she was sharing with me. So I hope you'll tune in with us in a couple of weeks as well to just learn about that, because we're a community and we're all doing this together, and I very much look forward to hanging out with you for a couple more times this year before we go on a break. I look forward to seeing you again next week. I'm Dr. Dan. Sing well.